Let us pray. O eternal Father, on high, in remembrance we gather at this 80th year springboard of the Naval Magazine Naval National Memorial. The lessons learned today come from that night in which the Port Chicago disaster enabled us to look collectively forward to our revealed social ideals of society's equality. Lord, memorizing the sailors and civilians lost in that late neighboring night of over 320 and 390 wounded, we place this honorable ceremony, this anniversary, into your great manifest, derived to bring a permanent museum so that equality and justice derived from the naval tragedy becomes the beacon that will be set by all American standards of future naval justice. Almighty God, here we pray in earnest that your divine will descend upon this gathering place. For all who have come to witness 80 years of progress and respectful memorial of social justice. In your most hallowed and divine name, whose love commands above all. Amen.
On behalf of the National Park Service, welcome to Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial. My name is Kaylin Berry, and I'm the Park Superintendent. Every year, for the past 15 years since this park has been established, we have solemnly honored the hundreds of men who died in a terrible wartime explosion, along with hundreds more who were injured. We reflected on bravery and sacrifice. We acknowledged injustices and discrimination that many suffered. And we praised the resilience and the determination of those who stood up against it. To those 15 years, add 65 more before them, and you will count the 80 long years, not only of somber reflection, but of deep pain and mourning that was the burden of the friends and family members. Multiple generations carried that burden. Today, we still sit solemnly, and we still reflect, and we still acknowledge, but to those parts of the story, we may add, these 80 years later, a brand new chapter. We turn the page, the new chapter opens up, and there, the heading at the top of the page, exoneration. I will let our honored guests and speakers share more of that new chapter with you, and just say here that the National Park Service is proud to have a role in shepherding the history and in stewarding this place. We look forward to playing our part in the continuation of the story, sharing its relevancy with as many people as we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and cherished family members, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Lauren Cabral, and as the commander of this installation, I am honored and privileged to be standing before you all and taking part in this ceremony. To our distinguished guests, Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable Carlos Del Toro, California's 8th Congressional District, the Honorable John Garamendi. California 10th Congressional District, the Honorable Mark DeSaulnier. And former Congressman, Mr. George Miller. We extend a heartfelt welcome to you all. Your presence honors the memory of those who gave their all for our freedom, and we are so fortunate to have you all here with us. More notably, we welcome the families and friends who join us today and still carry the weight of loss. We embrace you. Your pain is our pain, and your strength inspires us all. And finally, to the family members of Dr. Robert Ellen, who dedicated his life's work to amplify the significance of this disaster and educate us all on the value of diversity. We are grateful for his relentless tenacity and honor his spirit. I fully acknowledge that we are joined by so many others, not specifically mentioned, and who have personal ties to this event, or still are a critical component to celebrating the news of exoneration this week. Your voices and presence do not go unnoticed, and I hope we demonstrate our unwavering gratitude of all of your contributions. 80 years ago, on July 17, 1944, tragedy struck here, what was known then as the Port Chicago Naval Magazine, and it forever altered the course of our history. Today, on this solemn occasion, we gather at the Military Oceanic Terminal Concord to honor the memory of the 320 brave men who lost their lives in the largest World War II military disaster on American soil. Their legacy is etched into the fabric of our nation, a testament to resilience, courage, and the pursuit of unity. Once again, thank you for joining us on this day of remembrance. May their spirits continue to shine on these beautiful waters, and may their legacy guide us towards a better future. Surface warriors, ironclad, moving the force. Thank you for joining us.
I am honored and immensely humbled to be here today. The profoundly important story of the men of Port Chicago is one we all need to be familiar with, and one I will never forget. As President Lincoln said on a similar piece of hallowed ground, we are here to recognize a portion of this land as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that our nation might live. Often, when we think about national parks, we think of places of natural beauty or accomplishments we're proud of, like Yosemite or the Wright Brothers National Memorial. But national parks are also places that allow us to contemplate our dark past, places where as a nation we have failed. Not to dwell on all our flaws and failures, but so that we can examine them and learn from them. Places like Manzanar and Sand Creek Massacre. Port Chicago is a site where we can do this. But so many today have never heard of what happened here or know of its importance. So why is Port Chicago not well known? Likely because when many think about our country in World War II, it is viewed as a good war, the war fought by the greatest generation. Patriotism and sacrifices to support those fighting to ensure fascism didn't spread were lauded and celebrated. Today, we acknowledge the men of Port Chicago are part of that greatest generation, and that Port Chicago is a story of pain and strength, of oppression and perseverance, of despair and hope, and of resistance, that most American of efforts, one that gave birth to our nation and later to the civil rights movement. We are a story that has parts we can be proud of and parts we must learn from. 80 years ago this week, young African American men serving in the segregated Navy worked where we are right now. They were moving ammunition, moving it from boxcars to storage to rail cars and finally to ships, which would take these vitally important and dangerous tools to the men serving on the front lines of the Pacific Theater. This place was busy with these men working round the clock, and they were encouraged to work faster and faster and faster. Safety was not a priority. And then, at 10:18 on July 17, 1944, the fears of the men working here became a living nightmare. They knew their work was important, but not truly how dangerous it was, because they were assured the bombs were safe that they weren't live. At 10:18, 320 lives were instantly lost, and hundreds more were changed forever. To put some of this into perspective, I invite you all to look around at the people you are sitting with. Look around at everyone who is here, at the size of this gathering. We have over 400 people here today. Every single person down here at the dock, gone in an instant. Enlisted men, officers, Navy armed guards, maritime servicemen, civilian employees, a Marine, fathers, brothers, sons. 2 ships, the E.A. Bryan and the Quinault Victory, ripped to pieces and flung far beyond. A shockwave so strong it registered as a 3.4 on the Richter scale in Berkeley. Only a mile away in the town of Port Chicago, moviegoers had the roof blown off the theater, and every building was damaged. Windows were broken in San Francisco, and the explosion was felt as far away as Boulder City, Nevada, 500 miles away. For the Black enlisted men, the nightmare was just beginning. In the light of the day, these men were assigned to cleanup duty, to recover what was left of their friends. Instead of being given bereavement leave or transferred to other duties, these men were sent over to Mare Island and given barracks duties for 3 weeks. Their officers, the white men of this base, did receive 30 days of leave to process and heal. For 3 weeks, the men sat in their barracks and wondered what had happened, what caused the explosion, what was next for them, and they thought about their friends who had died. Until, on August 9th, the men were marched out and directed to the docks, where ammunition was waiting to be loaded. In those 3 weeks, everything had changed, while nothing had changed. An official inquiry was underway, but had not been completed. Its results would be submitted on October 30th, 1944. What it found was the explosions and the consequent destruction of property, death, and personal injuries were not due to the fault, negligence, or inefficiency of any person in the naval service or connected therewith, or any other persons. An accident. But still, it blamed the Black sailors. Even though their basic training never prepared them for loading ammunition, and they weren't properly trained when they got here. Even though both the professional stevedores from the Bay Area and the Coast Guard were alarmed by the lack of training for the men and the disregard of safety practices. Ultimately, the Navy determined that the enlisted personnel comprising the ordnance battalions of Port Chicago were poor material for training in the handling and loading of munitions and required an unusual amount of close supervision while actually engaged in this work. They were set up to fail. They were set up to take the blame. Those who are familiar with African American history will recognize this as a theme, despite the fact that Black men have fought for and served this nation since its creation almost 250 years ago. American history focuses on when they fail or do not meet exceptional standards, when in fact, against all odds, they succeed. When these men were being marched back to load ammunition without any new safety guidance or training, they stopped and refused. When asked if they would load ammunition, they said they would obey any other order. Something had to change. The Navy's reaction was to enact punishment in the strongest way possible. This was wartime. So they took 50 and charged them with mutinous behavior. Their trial, the largest mass mutiny trial in naval history, was an example, a warning. Even though in the trial it came out that Captain Nelson Ghost disobeyed the Coast Guard orders regarding safety and port security, that officers were betting on which unit could load fastest, that they were not explicitly given the order to load munitions on August 9th, and that even some were in sickbay on that day. NAACP lawyer and future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall attempted to bring their case to the court of public opinion. But after 80 minutes, 80 years ago this coming October, the Port Chicago 50 were found guilty of mutiny. Only this week, almost 80 years later, after an investigation by the Navy and by the decision of the Secretary of the Navy, Honorable Carlos Del Toro, who is here with us today, the Port Chicago sailors have been fully exonerated. And so today, we stand here to reflect on this history. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. We see that their actions did lead to safety procedures and the desegregation of the Navy before the other branches of the military were ordered to do so. But what was the cost? Many of the men didn't share their experience with their families, nor talk about it until Dr. Robert Allen tracked them down in the 1980s when he wrote the book on their experience, when he took steps to remember the men of Port Chicago, when he resurrected this story and started us on the path to the creation of this park, to where we are today. As I said earlier, I am humbled and honored to share this story because it is a hard one, a painful one, but a necessary one. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men who struggled and died and resisted here have consecrated it. But we can tell their story. That is our obligation. That is our pledge. That is our covenant. We share this story so that we can learn from our past failures and ensure that we endeavor to do better, to be better, to know that we are always working towards the more perfect union we know we can be, but also to honor those who came before us and sacrificed so much, as well as recognize the accomplishments and victories that have occurred. Every time I am out here, I am reminded of a quote by Robert Smalls, a formerly enslaved man, a Civil War U.S. Navy hero, South Carolina state representative and state senator, U.S. representative for South Carolina, and the namesake of the segregated Navy training camp at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center in World War II. In 1879, he said, "My race needs no special defense, for the past history of them in this country proves them to be equal of any people anywhere. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." The men of Port Chicago were not given that equal chance. The men who died here, the survivors, those court-martialed, and the men convicted of mutiny, they were not given the chance. So it is up to us to tell their story, to give them their equal chance. After you all leave today, I ask one thing. Remember the men of Port Chicago. Share their story. Elevate this story to the status of sacred sites like Gettysburg. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.
It's an honor to be here for this occasion. Superintendent Berry, thank you for that kind introduction and for your long career of public service to our nation. Chairman Giramundi, thank you for your tireless work for Port Chicago. It's great to be here in your district today, sir. Thank you for your partnership in Congress and for how much you care about our sailors, our Marines, and all our service members through your proud service in the United States Congress. We need more Giramundis in the world. Thank you. Congressman Miller, thank you for your decades of diligent and determined leadership on behalf of Port Chicago sailors and family. I truly would not be here today if it was not for your work. To the Reverend Diana McDaniel, Miss Yuli Padmer, Miss Sandra Day Evers Manley, and all those who advocated on behalf of the Port Chicago sailors for keeping the memory of this tragedy that is so often overlooked alive. I thank you all. Next, I'd like to recognize, perhaps more importantly, the family members in person and in spirit of those lost on that fateful day and those wrongly convicted in the aftermath. Know that your family member's service will never again be associated with the term mutineer. And I ask all the family members to please now stand up and be honored. Superintendent Leatherman, Superintendent Lee, Ms. O'Brien, as well as the tremendous number of advocates and guests, thank you all for joining us here today. Friends, Americans, fellow citizens committed to a more perfect union, today we celebrate justice long overdue. This effort, led by sailors, families, motivated citizens, altruistic organizations, has been decades in the making. Indeed, many of you here have played a critical role in ensuring that we never lost sight of this disaster and advocating for the exoneration of the Port Chicago sailors. Sadly, I must note that one of those great champions who has already been mentioned, Dr. Robert Allen, passed away 10 days ago, and exactly 1 week before the announcement on Wednesday. But at dinner tonight, Reverend McDaniel, thank you so much for sharing the story of me of how you spoke to him just a few weeks ago and mentioned to him that perhaps there might be good news coming. And I know that he had a sense that perhaps that was the case. So it's good to know that he's looking down on us today with the knowledge that this has come to fruition, all his hard work. Robert's seminal work on the disaster and the aftermath brought the necessary attention and scrutiny to this issue. This event marks a turning point in our nation's history, a moment when we confront the ghosts of the past and embrace the promise of more justice. For 8 decades, the story of Port Chicago has been a stark reminder of a grave injustice. But before I talk about Port Chicago itself again, I'd like to set the scene in July of 1944. As you all know, 6 weeks earlier, Operation Overlord and the invasion of Normandy marked the beginning of the end of World War II. And I was proud to be with those World War II veterans in Normandy to celebrate the history and their great victory. And the U.S. and Allied armies continued fighting their way north in Italy. In the Pacific, the 5th Amphibious Corps, comprising the U.S. 2nd Marine Division, the 5th Marine Division, and the Army's 27th Infantry Division, captured the island of Saipan, the first objective in the Marianas Islands and piercing the Japanese inner perimeter, allowing Allied forces to conduct strategic bombings in the Japanese homelands for the first time. Across the world, the Allies were indeed winning. The war was reaching its end. Only 13 months later, Japan would unconditionally surrender. President Franklin Roosevelt said, and I quote, "The American people and their righteous might will win through to absolute victory," unquote. And the American forces around the world were proving him right. And then on July 17th, munitions being loaded onto a cargo vessel, steamship E.A. Bryan, detonated, killing 320 sailors, members of the Coast Guard, a Marine, civilians, merchant mariners, and injuring an additional 390 individuals. I want to emphasize that number again. 320 Americans were killed in this disaster. We as a nation will never be able to express our full gratitude to all those deceased and their families for their dedication, service, and sacrifice. In times of crisis, the true character of a nation is revealed through the courage and the resolve of its citizens. The collective response to World War II exemplifies the indomitable spirit of the American people, who in the face of unprovoked aggression stood united in defense of liberty. We often discuss World War II with the benefit of hindsight, viewing our victory as inevitable, as if the march of progress was indeed unavoidable. But our eventual victory was not inevitable, even with 13 months left in the war in the Pacific. There is nothing inevitable about the relentless valor of our people, the American people, shown repeatedly throughout times of crisis. Then, as now, the true strength of our Navy is not in our ships, our submarines, our aircraft, but our people and their spirit and dedication to our nation's ideals. Then, as now, every sailor serving at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine had chosen to serve, and the U.S. Navy had an obligation to keep them safe. Every sailor loading on ammunition on steamship E.A. Bryan, who gave their last measure of devotion, chose to raise their right hand and swear an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. As did every one of the 258 sailors who were then tried and convicted as criminals for refusing to work in those unsafe conditions. That horrific explosion was etched in the hearts of a nation already grappling with the horrors of war. Most of these fallen heroes were African American men, their sacrifice echoing unheard amidst the deafening silence of official reports. Sailors, traumatized by the blast and deeply troubled by the unsafe working conditions, refused to return to a literal death trap. They weren't rebelling. They were pleading for their very lives, for the lives of their fellow sailors. Theirs was a desperate act of self-preservation, a refusal to be complicit in further destruction and bloodshed. Tragically, their stand was met with suspicion, hostility, and criminal charges. The subsequent general court-martial of 50 sailors for mutiny and summary court-martials of 208 others for disobeying orders labeled the 258 of them as criminals. These men, who had sworn an oath to defend their nation, were now ostracized, their voices drowned out by the roar of a system unwilling to acknowledge its very own failings. The 50 mutiny defendants were each sentenced to 15 years hard labor and suffered imprisonment until released in early 1946, long after the war was over. I often wonder what was going through their minds on Victory Day. Those convictions on court-martials in 1944 cast a long shadow. As noted by future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, there were many worrying issues with both the summary and the general courts-martial, including multiple violations of their constitutional right to due process. And I'll give you some examples. All of the Port Chicago 50 defendants were tried in a single trial, despite having very different circumstances, such as being from separate divisions or receiving differing orders. The 208 sailors tried at summary court-martial were also tried together in a single-day hearing. Many of them weren't present when the order to return to work, which they were accused of disobeying, was given. And of 50 sailors charged with mutiny, 2 were physically incapable of moving ammunition, one due to a broken arm and the other medically disqualified by a doctor. And yet, they received the same sentence of 15 years of hard labor as those accused of leading the work stoppage themselves. The Port Chicago 50 were assigned 5 officers to act as defense counsel, and yet only one of them was an attorney. And the assigned cases to each of the 5 counsels were not grouped together by unit, common circumstance, or potential common defenses, but merely alphabetically by last names. The defense was not permitted to cross-examine the defendants, and some evidence that was relevant to just a few sailors was wrongfully used to implicit all of the 50 sailors. And the jury in the mutiny case deliberated only for 80 minutes, or about 90 seconds per defendant, after a 5-week trial. The 208 sailors in the disobeying orders case were assigned only 3 counsels, a ratio of nearly 70 defendants to every counsel. 206 of those 208 pled guilty, yet they received no benefit from doing so and received the maximum available penalty. And notably, that penalty did not and could not include incarceration for the 208. Yet remarkably, after the trial, they were put on a prison barge and held in confinement under armed guard for the entirety of the general court-martial in an attempt to coerce them into offering testimony against the other defendants. And troubling so, both court-martials occurred before the Court of Inquiry report on the explosion was even finalized. That report contained opinions about the cause of the explosion, recommendations to improve ammunition loading, and noted several of the sailors' division officers felt the loading rate target was too high, showing the sailors were rightfully fearful of loading ammunition quickly. Those are the facts, ladies and gentlemen. On Wednesday, because of that, I announced my decision and signed the orders to set aside the court-martial results of all 258 sailors convicted nearly 80 years ago. Thank you. This decision was made in coordination with the White House and Department of Defense. And I'm so proud of President Biden and my Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, for empowering me with the freedom of movement to make the right decisions. This is indeed a momentous occasion, a long-awaited vindication for all 258 men court-martialed. As future Justice Thurgood Marshall noted in his brief on behalf of the Port Chicago 50, and I quote, "Justice can only be done in this case by a complete reversal of findings," unquote. That justice is what I delivered on Wednesday when I signed those orders. It clears their names, it restores their honor, and acknowledges the courage that they displayed in the face of immense danger. It represents what the families and advocates always knew, and finally, the legacy of their loved ones is no longer tarnished. But this action is more. It's about more than just correcting the historical record. It is a resounding affirmation of the values that we hold dear: justice, equality, and the right to a safe workplace. It sends a powerful message to every corner of our nation, and indeed the world. The Port Chicago 50 and the hundreds who stood with them may not be with us today, but their story lives on, a testament to the enduring power of courage and the unwavering pursuit of justice. They stand as a beacon of hope, forever reminding us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the fight for what's right can and always will prevail. Their legacy should inspire us all to be more vigilant, to speak truth to power, and to never give up on the pursuit of liberty and justice. I have sworn an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States 7 times in my life. The same oath that every one of those 258 sailors swore when they chose to enlist in the Navy to defend democracy during World War II, just like those veterans in Normandy. And each of us serving today carries the legacy of those who served before us. Service is not an obligation, it's a privilege, not a duty, it's a calling. It's an opportunity to be part of something greater than ourselves, to defend the values that define our nation and to make a lasting impact on the world. For the past 80 years, we have failed to rise to the occasion, to be the best version of ourselves, and recognize the courage, strength, and above all, the service of these brave sailors. Outstanding individuals never let us lose sight of what the best version of ourselves could look like. Individuals like Eleanor Roosevelt, whose great-granddaughter Tracy, please stand, is here with us today, my Deputy Chief of Staff. I'm honored to serve beside Tracy as my Deputy Chief of Staff, who also advocated on behalf of these sailors. Your great-grandmother is quite proud of you, Tracy, looking down on you today, as well as your great-grandfather. And as mentioned earlier, Thurgood Marshall, whose son, Thurgood Marshall Jr., otherwise known as Goody, is here with us today as well. I am lucky enough to call him a friend and a mentor. Goody, stand up, please. Goody, I'm honored to call you a friend and a mentor. And he joined me. I invited him to join me in my office Wednesday when I signed the orders. And that was a great moment. And I am quite confident that your father is also looking down on us today, proud of what we've done. Let this be a turning point, a moment where we learn from the mistakes of the past and commit to building a future where every voice is heard and every life is valued. Let the Port Chicago story serve as a permanent reminder of the power of collective action, the importance of historical truth, and the enduring promise of a more just America. May their story be a source of strength for generations to come, inspiring us all to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And I cannot say enough to each and every one of you who advocated on their behalf. But I'd like to take a brief moment before I close to extend one of the pens with which I signed that document to you, Reverend Diana, in representation of all the advocates who've done so much on behalf of this cause. Yes, today we celebrate a long-awaited victory for justice itself. On behalf of a grateful nation, thank you to all who have fought, served, and sacrificed in the long history of defending freedom around the world, and to all the families who served and sacrificed alongside them. Thank you all here today for taking the time to remember their sacrifice and making the world a better place. May God grant all of our sailors, Marines, and citizens, past and present, fair winds and following seas. Thank you.
I was listening, Mr. Secretary, as you related the history. And I was thinking about another very famous person, as you mentioned, Thurgood Marshall, and the work that he did. I was thinking of Martin Luther King. And on the memorial in Washington is a quote that fits what we're here today to observe. The long arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. The long, long arc doesn't get there by itself. It gets to justice by individuals, by organizations who say it cannot be, it must change. We've seen that today. So many of you here, the families who stood when introduced by the Secretary, the organizations that have been propelling this issue, all gave power to move that arc of justice to where we are today. And absolutely this would not happen were it not for the Secretary of the Navy. I'll guarantee you there have been others that have tried, but this man said, I will make it happen. Mr. Secretary, in the families, in the organizations, in this community, you have risen to a very, very special place because you made the change happen. You said it cannot be, and we will find a way to exonerate those who were unjustly. There are others that are here today. George Miller, you have declined the opportunity to speak. Do you mind if I speak in your place? You, all of us at this moment are at a national park. One of 5 units, 4 units. That national park was created by George Miller. This issue was brought to George's mind, I think almost 30 years ago, George. And you did what a determined representative will do. And that is you bit into this issue and you did not let it go. You passed it on to Marc Desaulniers, who is being represented here by Chanel. You passed it on to Barbara Lee, and they passed that task on to me as I became the representative in this district. So there's a long history of congressional involvement in this issue. And George, you lit the spark that made that all happen. Thank you so very, very much for that. The NAACP, already mentioned at the very outset of this travesty of justice. And the NAACP in its local chapters has never let this issue die. They have always, always stayed with it and made this one of their principal tasks to right an injustice and to bend that moral arc towards the ultimate justice that the Secretary has delivered. There's also other organizations here. The Contra Costa County Bar Association, Jonathan, the current president, and the other members of that organization took up this cause for many, many years. And you made this one of your principal tasks. I know that. You came into my office and badgered me until I said, I'm with you, I'm with you. So thank you so very much for that. I could and should go on and on recognizing all of those who played a critical role in this. Obviously, the military itself, the Navy, and now the Army running this facility. You often have uninvited visitors that want to come down and remember this place, remember what happened here. So for the military making all of this available through time over the last 16 years, we thank you for making this part of the legacy of what is now known as MODCO, for those of us that use the short form. I'm not going to repeat all that's happened here, but this exoneration that, Mr. Secretary, you made happen with the support, the advocacies of so many others, really marks an extremely important moment in that arc of the moral universe that was propelled not just by the righteousness of it, but by the incredible effort through many, many years of individuals who said, we must right a wrong. We must bend that arc to justice. And you have done it. Thank you all for making that happen.
Thank you so much, Kaylin. And I must say, to be a staffer for former Congressman George Miller and now for Congressman Marc Desaulniers for the last 23 years, today is an awesome day to me. Congressman George Miller, I had the awesome opportunity of serving for him for 14 years, but he represented this area for 40 years. And I just have to speak about him because he doesn't want to speak, but I want to give him his accolades, and I give them to him every time I see him. Thank you so much for all of your work. As they shared, this memorial is something that he fought for. And for 40 years, once he passed it on to Congressman Marc Desaulniers, they both continue to fight for Port Chicago and for the exoneration. And I think the part that is most special to me is fighting for injustices in their district, because they have so many things to champion, but they chose to champion this, to be on the side of right. And so for that, Congressman, thank you so much. And to all the staffers out there that that work hard on issues behind the scene, and all the individuals and community-based organizations and the phone calls we get on how can we help. This is a big win for everyone. And I just want to thank the secretary so much. I've been in tears all week, on and off, because it's just been a great day for us as well as staff. Thank you. I would like to read some words on behalf of Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. Dear friends, family, and community, while I'm unable to join you today, it is with great pride that our office is here to honor the lives and the memories of the survivors of the Port Chicago Naval Magazine. We stand here with you today with great honor and pride that after 80 years of this disaster, these 50 heroes have been exonerated. I am proud to carry the torch and to build on the work Congressman George Miller, along with Congressman John Garamendi and Congresswoman Barbara Lee, have helped make sure that these families and all of the community members have received the call and justice have been served. I would like to also share a letter that was shared with me by Vice President Kamala Harris. I send greetings to those gathered at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine to honor the anniversary and to honor the 320 lives lost 80 years ago. As we continue to mourn the loss of Port Chicago disaster, we honor the courageous men. We honor all of those survivors and their families. The 258 Black soldiers took action to expose the injustices and inequalities that was present here within the National Armed Forces. Thanks in part to the sacrifices of these individuals who are now able to celebrate 76 years of desegregation of the United States military. These sailors represented the best of who we are and who we continue to push to be and work towards our nation to have dignity, respect, and equality for all. That is why I'm so pleased that the Secretary of the Navy has fully exonerated the courageous sailors who were court-martialed and found guilty of mutiny and other related charges. This important action has righted the historic wrong and recognized their bravery and leadership. The legacy of these sailors will continue to have the lasting impact on generations to come. Together, I know we will continue to build a brighter future. Let us be unwavering in advancing justice and ensuring safety for all. I join you in remembering this tragedy and celebrating this historic exoneration, and I send my best wishes for a meaningful commemoration. Thank you.
I'm Diana McDaniel. I'm president of the Friends of Port Chicago National Memorial. And the people standing here with me are members of our board. We're not all here today, but most of us are. We're small, but we are mighty. We do a lot of work. We are a nonprofit public benefit corporation, and our mission is to honor those who died here, those who served here, those who were injured here, those who protested here. And this Friends group has successfully advocated to help achieve full National Park Service status for right where you are right now, to preserve its patriotic history and the contributions of African American sailors in helping to win World War II. We work to keep the story alive, so it's not forgotten. We work to enhance student and visitor education, and it used to be that we would work to clear their names, the people who were found guilty, but we don't have to do that part anymore. We say thank you to the secretary and to his staff. and all who have worked for this exoneration. Our board members are here, and this is a special group of talented and gifted people who are mission-driven. They're mission-driven folks who, along with Dr. Robert Allen, whose life's work included having the PC-50 exonerated. Robert was a founding member. He could be standing here with us. And so, Mark, would you say a few words?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Mark Brunner, and I'm on the board of Friends of Port Chicago. And I knew Dr. Allen for many years. And what struck me most about him, beyond the enormity of his accomplishments and his unwavering and tireless commitment and dedication to the pursuit of justice, was his warmth and positivity. No matter how daunting the tasks in front of us seemed, his enthusiasm and sense of determination were always contagious and infectious. He obviously saw the big picture. He had an incredible command of the historical detail, but he also made a human connection. And that made the important points and lessons that he had to teach us all the more powerful. He was a distinguished historian and activist, but I'll remember him as a good friend, and I will miss him, his good nature, and his contagious smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Robert actually called us the Port Chicago Committee at first, and then we became the Friends of the Port Chicago National Memorial. We have a table over there where those canopies are, and we invite you to stop by. We have a paper that we'd love to have you sign to put your address, your email on so that we can reach out to you. And we have some books over there that Robert wrote, The Port Chicago Mutiny. If you don't have it, we'd love to sell it to you. Our Friends group works with the National Park Service, and we help plan this event that you're here today to celebrate. And we look forward to working with you more, Kaylin. We look forward to working with you more. And we also work collaboratively with the East Bay Regional Park District. And so we're in the process of thinking about the Visitors and Interpretive Center that's coming forth. So we thank you, Superintendent Kaylin. We are grateful to you. I want to say the National Park people are very special people. I don't know what they eat, but they are very nice. They take care, they maintain and care for this property and for this site in our public lands. So park rangers are very special, and we love working with them. I'm really here for thank yous. So we do thank all our Congress people who've helped this exoneration come about. But our greatest recognition and thank you goes to the men who made the ultimate sacrifice on that tragic day so long ago. We're grateful for those who served at this facility, who made a difference in the lives that we live today. We could be speaking Japanese or we could be speaking German, but we are speaking English. So now I would like to first acknowledge families of those Navy men, maritime servicemen, Coast Guardsmen, contractors or civilians who perished in the explosion. So for those whose family members perished in the explosion, would you stand? We want to say thank you, and we're sorry for your loss. Are there any military survivors? I doubt it, because they're way in their 90s now, maybe hundreds. Any military survivors? Every now and then we have one that shows up from that explosion. So no. We say thank you to them for their service. And are there any family members, descendants of those military men who served and survived here? Yes. I know you stood once, but it's never too much for us to say thank you. And a casualty was the town of Port Chicago, which was razed. And so we want to acknowledge this, if there are any survivors here from the town of Port Chicago. Are you in here? Are you here? Anybody from the city of Port Chicago? Bless you. You know, it was a sad state of affairs that they lost their whole town, their whole city. So out of the rubble and out of the pain of that tragic day and that tragic war, something new had to come forth, a new way of living. Out of the rubble, out of the pain of that day, of that mutiny trial, of being found guilty, we have been waiting, and something new has come. A new day has begun, and we say with deep gratitude and appreciation, thank you to all those who served here, all those who have lost their lives, the many survivors of that tragic explosion that I have spoken with have wanted us to know that they did their darndest to win the war. They put their all into it. And now I'd like to tell you, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I'd like to tell you about someone very special to us. The Friends of Port Chicago National Memorial every year give a Commemorative Heroes Award. And this year, we have selected a National Park Service person. Her name is Kelly English. And Kelly, where are you? We invite you to look in the program, because in the program it tells a little bit about you.
It's been an honor and a privilege to work with Kelly for so many years. She's a true dynamo, the perfect combination of passion and grace. She's a natural storyteller and leader, and she has a unique ability to engage and inspire those who are around her. She injects meaning and purpose into everything she does. She teaches, she helps us grow, she drives us to do better, she provides empathy and comfort, and she's just always a fun person to be around. Her contributions to our mission have been immeasurable, and we will be forever grateful. We are pleased to present you with this very small token of our immense and prodigious appreciation, and we hope you never move too far away from us.
You want to read it? You want to read it?
The Friends of Port Chicago Memorial salute Kelly Y. English as its 2024 Commemorative Hero for your commitment to keeping the Port Chicago story alive, for your dedication to the 392nd National Park of our country and the National Park Service, and for being a stalwart in the most extraordinarily sincere, thoughtful, and supportive way to our Friends organization. With deep gratitude, we say thank you.
I am overwhelmed and honored to receive this award. It is incredibly humbling to reflect on the illustrious past commemorative heroes, many of whom are here today, and to feel the spiritual presence of Dr. Robert Allen and our beloved park ranger, Raphael Allen, who are no longer with us, as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the explosion and to celebrate the long-awaited exoneration of the sailors. Wow, how amazing it is to be able to say that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to the Friends of Port Chicago National Memorial for your friendship, for this tremendous honor, and for your long-standing commitment to this site and this cause. The history of this place is not an easy story to tell. It is complex and it is nuanced. And the way we tell it matters. It is remarkable to consider that at this National Park Service site, our collective efforts in telling the story and the advocacy it has inspired have now resulted in actually changing the history itself. It has been an absolute privilege to be part of that, and it is some of the most meaningful work I could ever have dreamed in doing in my career. For this has never been just a job for me. It has always been a mission and a passion. Every time I've ever set foot on this site, regardless of why I'm here or what else is going on, I've always stepped back and taken a minute to reflect on the sacrifices of those we lost 80 years ago and the courage and resilience of those who survived. And every time I pledge on behalf of myself as well as my agency to honor their memory through telling their stories and carrying their legacy forward. Today, I renew that promise, and I look forward to discovering all the ways that we can fulfill it together. I would like to thank my National Park Service Port Chicago colleagues, past and present. So many of us have shared in the vision for what this site stands for, and I would not be standing up here without your unwavering dedication and support. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge my amazing husband, Kevin Damstra, with East Bay Regional Park District. I think the two of us have rewritten the manual on effective agency-to-agency partnerships. And your love and support has enabled me to pursue my passion for this story. Lastly, I would like to sincerely thank all of the descendants, so many of whom are here today. This history has always felt just as personal for me as it is for you and your families. And I channel my own family's history of military service in telling the stories of your loved ones. I appreciate your trust in me, and I will continue to do right by them. Thank you.
We're a little behind schedule. And I gave some serious thought to skipping over these acknowledgement sections and all these thank yous, but I'm not going to do it because you all deserve to hear the thank yous, the accolades, the appreciation that we have for so many people here. So once again, Secretary, thank you so much for being here. Congressman Garamendi. Chanel, please give Congressman DeSaulnier our very best, and former Congressman George Miller, who helped create this place and has done so much for this community. We're very, very grateful. Reverend Diana McDaniel, the president of the Friends of Port Chicago, cannot be understated or overstated how amazing she is. With appreciation for your thoughtful prayers and wise words, thank you to Lieutenant Michael Chester, our Navy chaplain. And I'm not sure it's been said yet, so I'm going to make sure I say the name loud and clear of the General Counsel, who has been referenced so many times for his incredible work on this effort. Sean Coffey, instrumental in conducting the legal analysis that supported the case for exoneration. Yeah. I learned last night that Sean gives due credit to the Secretary for the wisdom and the will to make this important decision, but also that the Secretary gives credit to you for the strength of the arguments that supported that decision. You haven't had a chance yet to meet the Deputy Director for the National Park Service, Frank Lands. Frank was until very recently the NPS Regional Director for this area with oversight over this park and several dozen others. And as with so many people who encounter this story, Frank found that it resonated with him. And as a man of action, that meant he made it part of his mission to advocate for it, to tell others about it. And having a previous career in the Army, 20 years or so worth, he made excellent use of his very expansive Rolodex of all military brass and called everyone he knew as often as he could. Thank you, Frank, for your leadership. Christina O'Brien is here, Deputy to the Commanding General of the U.S. Military Surface Deployment and Distribution Command. Thank you so much. Great to have you. And from the office of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who has been referenced here for her leadership, we're glad to have Field Representative Joseph Hansen. Thurgood Marshall Jr., like father, like son, an accomplished attorney with a distinguished career. And if you want to know more about what his father did in this history, you come back to this park and we'll tell you all about it. Or go to the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, where someday the East Bay Regional Park District and the National Park Service will co-manage a visitor center that can bring this many hundreds of people and more to come learn about the story. Lieutenant Cabral, thank you again. Sergeant Major, glad to have you here. Want to congratulate, the wind is finally doing what it wants to do. Once again, Kelly, congratulations. I think she's over there now. And I want to thank Ranger Hillary Grabowska. She did exemplary work as the principal organizer for this momentous and large and complex event. It'd be difficult to count the number of hours that she spent planning for it. And then she led the execution of it. So well done, Hillary. We're proud. We're grateful. And gratitude must also be expressed for a whole host of National Park Rangers from every professional division or discipline that our four parks host. They not only pitched in to make this event happen, but they keep the park running every day in all sorts of ways, and I could not be more proud to work with them. You are an awesome team. I'm glad to be working with you. Thank you. From the City of Concord, always wonderfully represented at this event. We're so glad to have Mayor Eddie Burson here, Vice Mayor Carlin Obernger, Council members Hoffmeister and Nakamura. From the City of Pittsburgh, Vice Mayor Jelani Killings and Council Member Chanel. Scales Preston. City Manager Garrett Evans is here as well. And from the Contra County, forgot where it was for a second, Board of Supervisors, thanks to Diane Burgess and Ken Carlson for being here. Awesome. Very, very, very good. Did y'all know we have a lot of cast members from the Port Chicago play who are here? That's pretty cool. From the East Bay Regional Park District, which has been a leader and an amazing partner in the stewardship of the Port Chicago story, and is shepherding the creation of the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Not the easiest name, but I will say it proudly every time I can. We have General Manager Sabrina Landreth and Deputy General Manager Ana Alvarez. I'm searching, but my crowd, thank you, Sabrina. We have Board President Elizabeth Eccles and board members Rosario and White. And we have key planner with us for this event and in many other things, interpretively as we tell this story, Kevin Damstra and Pia Loft and other staff members who have really helped this day happen. The President and CEO of the Western National Parks Association, which is our cooperating association, is here, Marie Buck. We have two former superintendents of this park, Tom Leatherman, who served here 13 years and now is at Pearl Harbor, and Martha Lee, who was before him and then later retired as a Deputy Regional Director for the Pacific West region. Ray Murray from the region is here as well. It's so great to have you. Jonathan Lee, your leadership has also been acknowledged today, but I'm not going to get off the podium without saying it as well. That kind of advocacy, that kind of tenacity, is what it takes. And the Bar Association's president, David Pearson, is here as well. And I assume from the leadership of the association, you got some support, and we're grateful for all of it. Yuli Padmore, can I get a executive director of the Port Chicago Alliance, advocate, and organizer of a wide variety of activities this weekend to celebrate Port Chicago. Retired National Park Service Ranger Betty Reed Soskin. I just want you all to know this, that besides becoming a legend in the green and gray as we reference it, Betty was also part of the World War II home front. And as a young woman, she hosted a number of African American sailors from Port Chicago in her home for social time that they were not permitted to enjoy in some other parts of the area. Thank you, Betty. To the colonels and majors and lieutenants and sergeants, and quite possibly every other rank represented here from numerous divisions and battalions, and quite possibly every other unit type of the military. Can't name you all. I saw you on the list, and I want to let you know that we're grateful that you're sharing this day with us, and that you understand why it matters, and of course, for your service to our country. Thank you to the Coast Guard and the East Bay Regional Park District Air Support Unit. And thank you once again to the fabulous team at MOPCO. And I will not step away from this podium without adding my voice to the chorus, who is so glad that the families are with us today. So happy for our outcome. And I hope you'll come up and meet me. I'm glad that you're here. We all are.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, concluding this 80th National Memorial, we seek, O Lord, your continued divine grace in a combination effort for completion of a future National Museum fitting the lessons learned of this once naval tragedy now that has come to justice. O Lord, for all those who served, defended, and sacrificed while wearing the cloth of our nation, we vow to thee to remember always. For you are the redeeming Lord. From the fiery moments that Port Chicago disaster site became a great democratic American justice story, we now pray and remember the civilians and sailors lost some 80 years ago. May they always remember and stay in our memories for as long as they live in our memories, and we keep them alive, O Lord. You keep them alive. In your most hallowed watch, and your most hallowed name that brings justice. Amen.
Now we will begin our funeral honors with taps. Please stand, if you can, during these events. The flag was presented to Carol Cherry, daughter of Cyril Shepard Jr. one of the Port Chicago 50. We have a long-standing tradition of honoring the victims by placing a wreath in the water. Please direct your attention to the water and watch as the Motco Patrol team places a wreath. This concludes our ceremony. But now we invite you to take a flower and place it in the water yourself in honor of the Port Chicago sailors, or you may do so on the memorial. The reception follows at the Army Reserve Center. Please join us if you're able.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please have your attention for just but a few moments. My name is Kevin Damser of the East Bay Regional Park District. We are very happy and proud to be partners with the National Park Service at the future Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Thank you. We do have a few very short remarks about the future regional park, about the partners and the people that have helped to make this. We all have had the opportunity to hear a lot of people already, so I will continue to keep us moving. And I expect just a couple of minutes. Please continue to get food if you have not finished eating. First, I would like to introduce our President of the Board, President Eccles.
Thanks very much. Thank you all so very much for being here today. My name is Elizabeth Eccles. I'm President of the East Bay Regional Park District Board of Directors. I am deeply honored to be here at this significant moment in time to commemorate the lives lost 80 years ago and to celebrate the exoneration of the 258 Black soldiers who refused to go back to work in unsafe conditions and change history in the process. At the East Bay Regional Park District, we are committed to ensuring the history, bravery, and legacies of these men will never be forgotten. We appreciate the Secretary of Navy's leadership in deciding to exonerate these courageous men. We have long supported the call to exoneration. As we turn to the future, and many speakers this morning talked about the future and shining a light on the story and making sure the world knows what happened here at Port Chicago and to make sure that it never, ever, ever happens again. I know that I grew up here in the East Bay and we learned all about racial injustice around the country, but nobody ever mentioned what happened in our own backyard. And so this must be changed. People must know this story. And so we are excited to look to the future and to work to create a world-class visitor center and regional park that will shine a light on this important history. When the East Bay Regional Park District, with support from the community, acquired and named the park Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, it was to guarantee that there would always be a place where people can gather, not only to learn this history and have meaningful conversations to learn about the past, but to help create a better future. The park is poised to become an accessible location for families of these brave men, community groups, government agencies, school groups, and others to commemorate the tragic loss of lives while also honoring the bravery and courage of the sailors who stood together after the disaster. It's our hope that the Park and Visitor Center, which is being advanced with the support of the community and our congressional representatives, and in partnership with the National Park Service, that this Park and Visitor Center will preserve the history of your families and that the legacy of Port Chicago 50 will be taught and shared forever. We'd like to welcome you to join us in working to create the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. and to thank all of those here today who have already engaged with us on this. Our staff is outside if you want to learn more. I'm sure they'd love to talk with you. We believe in the power of parks to foster meaningful connections and conversations by providing equitable access and preserving cultural and environmental history. The Park District aims to create inclusive spaces which serve our community for generations to come. In partnership on this important work, I would like to deeply thank U.S. Navy Secretary Carlos Del Toro and everyone here from the Navy, Lieutenant Colonel Lauren Cabral, Commander of MOTCO, and all of the members of the 834th Transportation Battalion. National Park Service Deputy Director of Operations Frank Lands, and everyone here from the National Park Service. We heard from U.S. Representatives Mark DeSaulnier and John Garamendi this morning, so thank them, and former Representative George Miller, and I also, former Senator Barbara Boxer has been involved in this work. Assistant U.S. Attorney and Director of the Contra Costa Bar Association, Jonathan Lee, you'll be hearing from him shortly. The Reverend Diana McDaniel, President of Friends of Port Chicago. I want to thank you again and all of the members of Friends of Port Chicago. Yuli Padmore, Executive Director of Port Chicago Alliance, and all the members that have worked so hard to get where we are today. Regional Parks Foundation Board Director Keith White and his wife Rose. And then I have some of my fellow board members and our General Manager Sabrina Landritz. So we have, she's here, plus board members Colin Coffey, John Mercurio, and Dee Rosario. And most importantly, we want to thank the families and friends of all those who perished in this explosion, those who survived, and those who were unjustly charged. The history of your loved ones will be preserved forever, never to be forgotten. Thank you.
Great to see you all here, and what an exciting day to finally have this happen. On behalf of the National Park Service and former Superintendent Martha Lee, who's here. Martha was the superintendent when the site was designated a unit of the National Park Service, but as may not have been mentioned, the National Park Service was involved with this site prior to its formal designation. It was an affiliated site when it was originally dedicated, and so for many years we facilitated tours out there before it was even a unit of the National Park Service. So kudos to Martha and all the work she did. I took over from Martha for about 12 years, serving as a superintendent. But I think the story of Port Chicago is really illustrated in all the people that have been thanked already. We are all part of a family who are trying to make sure that this story is not forgotten. And the exoneration is not the end of this story. In many ways, this is the beginning of more people knowing about it and more of an opportunity for us to share this history. So I hope that you will all come back, bring people with you who don't know about this history, support the development of a visitor center where people won't have to get their ID checked when they're going on the base, because the visitor center won't be on the controlled part of the base, it'll be on the inland portion. We will always take people out to the memorial on the waterfront, but we want a place to tell this story where we can get more people there, and working in conjunction with East Bay Regional Parks, I think this is an amazing opportunity. So I hope in the future I get invited to the groundbreaking, I get invited to the grand opening, and I hope to see all of you there so that we can all celebrate that more people have the opportunity to learn about this history and be advocates for making sure that we have more inclusive history that's shared with the public. So thank you all.
My name is Jonathan Lee, and I am the chair of the Port Chicago Task Force of the Contra Costa County Bar Association. Our group was formed about 3 years ago, and we had two goals. One was to tell the story and the history of Port Chicago. And two was to advocate for the exoneration of the Port Chicago 50. We've been guided in this work by pioneers and giants such as Thurgood Marshall and his briefs, and Dr. Allen and his book. I brought my copy of this book with me today because I wanted to illustrate that his work is always close to when I'm working on this project. We're also animated by a key principle. As Dr. King observed, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we didn't have to look anywhere. We looked in our own backyard here in Contra Costa County, and we found injustice that mattered to us, that we cared about, and we wanted to do something about it as members of the bar. Lawyers have a special obligation to seek justice in their work, and that's what our group has been doing. We made a bunch of arguments for why the exoneration should take place. That was the speech I threw away as of last Wednesday. But you can learn about our arguments at our table outside if you're interested. I want to tell you about what we did. In order to tell the story, we did trial reenactments. We did webinars. We wrote letters to groups. We went out and talked to groups. I want you to know we talked to 4 categories: civil rights groups, religious groups, veterans groups, and lawyer and legal groups. The Federal Bar Association has been very instrumental in this, and we did one of our trial reenactments was simulcast at the U.S. District Court in the ceremonial courtroom nationwide to chapters of the Federal Bar Association. Civil rights groups including the NAACP, the Citizens for Historical Equity, and other groups. Veterans groups, the Black Veterans Project of New York City, the Delta Veterans groups. Religious organizations, one of the largest Baptist churches in Oakland, who's been a historic advocate for justice, signed a resolution. A major suburban Presbyterian church did the same thing, and other churches and other groups and organizations wanted to raise their voice. Lastly, I know my time is short. What I want to say is that the greatest honor of all, and this has been an honor of a lifetime to do this work, has been to work and to get to know the men themselves through their testimony, through the records that we've been able to find about them. These are individual stories that need to be lifted up and told individually and celebrated as the catalysts of the modern civil rights movement. And sadly, they gave everything they had for their country in World War II, and their country wasn't there when they needed them at that time. But now, thanks to the declaration of last Wednesday, the nation has come back and given these men what they so richly deserve, exoneration. On behalf of a grateful community, our organization, and everyone who's worked with us on this, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
If I could get everybody's attention, this past July 4th, I actually gave a speech in Spain to about 5,000 people, and I was competing with them because the bar was open. So I took executive privilege and I shut the bar down. Now, the chow line here is far too good to shut down tonight. So I want to first give a hand of applause to the executive chef. Where is she? Put up your hand. And all the servers here tonight who are helping us out for this wonderful, wonderful meal. But if I could actually get you to chew and not speak for the next 5 minutes, I appreciate it. Just 1 minute, please. There's 2 individuals here who truly are heroic in our nation's history. Excuse me, Colonel. Colonel, you in the Army. It's great to be Secretary of the Navy. There's 2 individuals here who I think have earned a right to also say a few words, and I'd like to introduce them. First, I'd like to have Tracy Roosevelt come up and just say a few words about her great-grandmother and what this meant to her. And then I'm going to ask my dear friend, Goody Marshall, to close us up by just saying a few words to his surprise. Tracy?
Well, it's a lot of fun when your boss calls on you without any notice. But it really has been the honor of my life to work for Secretary Del Toro, and in particular, this week, because this is something that has changed history. And to be even a small part of that, it's remarkable. My great-grandmother, Eleanor Roosevelt, cared a lot about who was in different positions. It's why she worked so hard for politics. And I think you've seen that with the Secretary and the General Counsel, that the 2 of them being in their jobs has made such a difference.
Talk about Eleanor.
Thank you. Direction's good. So Eleanor really cared about advocates. And when my father talks about going to Hyde Park and spending time with her in the summers, he talks about how you could be sitting at her dining room table and you could be sitting next to a UN dignitary, you could be sitting next to a man she met on the subway who was petitioning her for something, and she would invite them all to come and join and have a meal together. And I think it's because she really cared about advocates. And you saw that with Mary McLeod Bethune and their relationship. You saw that with her relationship with Adlai Stevenson. But for me, it's all the advocates, both here today and over the last 80 years, that we have to give credit to. They have made this an issue and helped us remember forever. So I just wanted to thank you, and thank you on behalf of my great-grandmother for the great work you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm saying that facetiously because I was not expecting to stand up here, but I do want to thank you for your leadership and your dedication to the job, and to express just how remarkable this accomplishment is, and to thank you and your staff, your remarkable staff, for putting together the materials necessary to do what you did on Wednesday. So many went before and wanted to get halfway there and failed to get even that far. And the courage and dedication to do what you did is a wonderful reason for us to all be gathered here. But I also want to, this is a cause for great joy for all of us, but it's also a reminder not only of each of the individuals whose names have been cleared, whose families have been cleared of this stain, and let's all resolve to read about them and continue to learn about them and tell their story. And I say that in part because in the midst of all this joy, I think we all are also reminded that for all of them, there are countless others who suffered the same kinds of indignities merely for doing their job in service to our country and to all of us, whose names have been lost to history. So for all that has been achieved this week, let us remember that it symbolizes a lot more work that we all can do collectively as a society. And the last thing I want to do, because lawyers don't always get a pat on the back, is to thank the Bar Association here for all of the wonderful hard work, and the lawyers at the Department of the Navy, particularly with the leadership of Sean Coffey, for all the hard work that was done there.
Thank you all very much. It is my great pleasure again to invite you all to stay involved, learn more about our future Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Please come and join us on some of our public access tours that we have, where we're already starting to share this story, and we look forward to hosting you all there in the future. Thank you.